So Chris, you gonna come up? I'm gonna let you start.
Well,
You wanna talk? You wanna use a little rod?
thank you.
Demonstrate.
Thank you, folks, for coming to Catch's workshop on fly casting. I'm the prop here, but Catch is going to go through some of the.
Stand right here so the camera. Okay.
Catch is going to go through the basics about fly casting, the mechanics, the physics involved, and then he's going to go into some of the demonstrations of how to do exactly what you're going to do. But the first thing we're going to start off with is a fly rod, which I think everybody in here knows, in which you have to then there are 5 rules that you need to follow. So Catch, start off.
Okay, so the basis of all casting is to pick up and lay down. Oh, in Jason Borger's book, he starts with that as the fundamental cast, and then he builds what he calls casting modules on there. Right here, this is a great book, by the way. If you want to learn techniques, every separate thing. He basically takes the basic cast, which is pick up and lay down, and he builds that on to reach mend, curve cast,
Roll cast.
double haul.
But it's a step-by-step process.
Yes.
You learn one skill, and you move to the next skill, and you just add each skill together. And he actually breaks them all down.
But the important thing, this is the thing he says so important, both in his seminars and his book, is to be a successful caster, you really have to get the basic cast down. If you can get the basic cast, that PULD we'll call it, the PULD, pick up, lay down, cast right. You get perfect. Everything else will come a lot easier, because then the only problem you will have is executing that particular extension of the basic cast.
And it's worth learning and practicing, because the last thing you want to hear is your guy grumble, this guy can't cast.
Yes.
We're glad you paid $500 to spend the morning.
Yes. Guides love their clients who can cast well, believe me.
And they hate teaching casting.
They'll
do it. They get paid for it.
Yeah, it's money.
But they really don't like to untie knots.
Yeah,
But they do it all day long.
especially with knots.
Yes.
So anyway, when you start off, of course, you want to take enough line out to basically begin your cast. And you have your line sitting right there. The one cast that's different from the basic cast is the roll cast. And that's the one that you actually should learn first, because that's the way you get your line out and extend it out in order to start the cast. So the roll cast is really simple. You just bring your rod tip to about 1 o'clock, create this crescent with your line and the rod. So it looks like a crescent moon. If you fill this in, it'd be like a crescent moon. And then just bring it forward, just like you're doing a normal cast, 10 o'clock, and then stop and lay down. And you can see how it just.
And if you try this out on the grass, or you try it in here, you'll see it's really, really hard for lesser beings. But if you have the technique down right,
Yeah, it works. You can do it on there.
nothing, it's glass.
It works better on water though, because you've got some friction down here. And so that's what makes it roll out when you do it. You can see it just execute. Now I can begin the PULD cast, the basic cast. This is my fishing position right here. I always want to fish with my rod tip near the water. That's whether I'm fly fishing, spin fishing, bait cast fishing, whatever. Why? Because I want to be able to feel that strike when that fish hits and be able to set the hook. If I have my rod tip up here, what's going to happen?
Slide.
Exactly, slack. The fish might hit, I might even not even feel the fish hit. So, you always start from the fishing position right here with your rod tip in the water.
And if you count in steps, that's step one.
Yes. Then you're gonna bring your rod tip slowly to the 10 o'clock position.
And why slowly? Because if you do it fast, you make slack in front of you.
And also because if you do it real fast, you create drag. Back when I took engineering fluid dynamics, there's a thing called Reynolds number. The Reynolds number actually goes higher when you actually have something moving real fast than when you have it moving slow. So you really want to make that kind of a slow pull like that to break the surface tension of the wall. At the same time, you don't really want to stop right here to start your cast. Because if you do that, then you've got surface tension all over again. So you're going to bring it up to 10 o'clock, and then once you're going to accelerate smoothly back to the 1 o'clock position, like this. Pretend there's a big clock right here, okay? And this is 1 o'clock, this is 12 o'clock, this is 11 o'clock. Well, for me. Yeah, okay. So this would be your 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. But from your position, you want to make it 10 to 1.
And if you're telling a child about this, a teenager or something, ask them if they know what a round clock looks like. Because they may have a watch on. You know,
Digital homework.
Yeah.
The important thing is that you want to keep a narrow arc like this. The key to fly casting, successful fly casting, is to keep the rod tip moving in a straight line through the cast. Okay, if your cast starts at 9 and ends at 3, you see that I've made a big arc with it. And guess what happens to the line? It makes a big arc like this as well. So by starting about 10 o'clock and going to 1 o'clock, you see narrow arc, it makes a narrow loop with the fly line. When you bring it back like that, you want to make a firm stop. You want to accelerate through to a firm stop and keep that stop. There's some problems that people have where they call creep or drift, where you bring it back here and then it a little further back, kind of like they're winding up for that big fly cast. That was my problem when I first got started. When we formed the club in Baton Rouge, I thought I was a pretty good fly caster. And I got a rude awakening the first year of our club when we had a distance casting contest. I got out there and I started casting, and as far as I could go, it was 45 feet, no matter how hard I tried. And there was one guy who was casting 82 feet. Now he was doing something called the double haul. But for one starters, I didn't have good equipment. I had a Martin rod that had 7 guides on an 8-foot rod. Okay. First rule is, how many guides did you have on your fly rod?
Same as the number of feet in length.
Right, not counting the tip top.
Minimum.
Exactly. So if you have a 9-foot rod, you should have 9 guides, not counting the tip top. Second problem I had was my fly line had more cracks than the U.S.-Mexican border. I mean, you run your finger through this guy. That's how it sounded. So I did not have good equipment. I went out and I bought Augus's setup at the time, equivalent to the Clearwater today. It was called the Green Mountain outfit. Had a nice line, graphite rod. It was an 8-foot 5-weight. And immediately that added 12, 15 feet to my cast right there. I still wasn't a very good caster. I'd go out there and I'd try, in the next year when we did the casting contest, I got more distance, but I still was doing something wrong. Because I know I wasn't double hauling, but there were guys who couldn't double haul either. They were getting 60, 65 feet, and I was struggling to get that far. Well, we had a gentleman by the name of Dave Diaz down in New Orleans. You may have heard of it. He's a legend in casting circles throughout the world. He passed away last fall. Who's an FFI member? in here. You received the Gulf Coast Council newsletter. There was an article about Dave Diaz in there. For the rest of you, you can go on the GCC website and read the newsletter and read that article on Dave. But he was an incredible human being. And he was an excellent teacher. He had taught at college at the UNO, and he had this real calm demeanor about himself. And so he'd come up and he'd tell him like this. He says, you know, Catch, he says, have a nice smooth stroke, but you're doing a few little things wrong. I said, well, tell me, Dave, please. He said, well, you're drifting a little bit on the back cast. It's almost like when you're making that final cast, you're trying to wind up to make that cast. The second thing that you're doing wrong is you're pushing it too hard when you try to make that final cast. It's like you're accelerating too fast. And when you're going down, you have a movement like a tomahawk. I said, well, that's how I learned it. I was at some seminar at the Louisiana Sportsman Show. Before it was the Louisiana Sportsman Show, it was some other sportsman show, but anyway. They had a guy out there doing a fly casting demonstration. And he was doing this. And that's how I learned. He said, no. He said, that's not right. He said that the arm has to stay, the hand has to stay in a straight line so the rod tip can travel in a straight line. So that was one thing. As far as the drift, let me tell you what happened. If you go too far back with your fly rod, hold that on like this. Let me show you what happens. If you have your rod tipped this far back on your back cast, look how much bend there is in that rod right there. Now, if it's at 1 o'clock, oh no, hold it tight. Okay, look how much bend you have. Now, if you have it at 1 o'clock, it's got the same amount of tension on here. Look how much more bend I have in that rod. Any fishing rod is both a lever and a spring. It's a lever in the sense that the added length to it gives you more speed as you're moving forward. The angular velocity is much faster than something, throwing a little with your hand, for example. But it's also a spring. There have been some arguments on some websites that, well, fly rods really are more lever than a spring. That's true. Only about 25% of the energy that's loaded into a fly rod comes from it being a spring. 25% is significant, okay? If your boss came to you and said, Bob, we're not going to give you that pay raise because it's only 25%. You wouldn't be happy, right? Right. So it is significant. And so that's why I tell people, treat it like a spring. Think about how much you want to load that rod, bend that rod in your cast. And you do that by keeping it in that narrow arc. Now let go. Look what you stepped out of the line.
I think it called on this. Yeah, we'll try it again.
Try it again. Watch what happens.
Okay.
Boy, it's got lots of flex to it. Okay, ready? Not too much, not too much. Okay, there we go. See, I really didn't have to put any energy into it whatsoever to make that line go forward. Just the fact that that line on the back cast loads that rod, if you do, that's why the back cast is the most important aspect of this cast.
Just like golf.
Yeah.
Your back swing's important.
Yeah. If you get the back cast right, the forward cast can work for you. Even if you don't make a perfect forward cast, it's going to work out right. So let me
you make a
finish
bad back cast.
Okay. So I was talking about the pick up and lay down. I said, let's start at 10, and go back to about 1 o'clock position and pause. How long do I pause? Well, you can watch the fly line go straight behind you like that. But I'll give you a little tip that I learned years ago from one of the gurus that I took casting class with. He said, when you see that line going past your rod tip like this, start executing forward cast. And that's because if I wait and feel a tug on the end of that line, when that
Okay,
line is
you like
straightened
grass.
out, yeah. If I do the back cast on most rods, graphite rods, I might feel a tug when that line straightens out. By the time that tug happens and the time I react is a full half second. And by then, that line's already dry, going down to the ground. So if you find yourself with your line, you back cast it, and even though you've got it at the 1 o'clock position, you find your back cast dragging the ground back there, you're probably waiting a little too long to get started moving forward. So I took that tip to heart. There you go, we're gonna start now. See, and sometimes on a slower rod like this, you might want to say Mississippi. I'm gonna say Mississippi, and then going forward, see how it works out.
For a non-physicist, you might think longer line and longer pause.
That's right. The more line you have out, the longer you're gonna pause. But you're still gonna have, it's gonna be longer because it's gonna take longer for that end of that line to go past the rod right here in this position. So it works no matter how much line you have out there.
You don't have to know physics.
It's a really good guide.
So you're talking about the end of the fly line going past your rod on
The
the
nail line.
fly,
The fly going past you,
the fly.
the fly, yeah. Yeah, because you're gonna have a hard time seeing the line, but you can see the fly going past like this. And after a while, I don't even have to do that because I've got this peripheral vision that, you know, after a while you start to get it. You can see that fly going, it's going past that rod tip now. I'm able to bring it forward. So bring it back and pause for a second. And then you're gonna bring it forward. Same way that you brought it back. Smooth acceleration going forward to a stop, a hard, fast stop. And then after the stop, you're gonna drift your rod tip down with the line. Okay? Let me tell you a little bit about the physics of that forward cast like that. And it's on the back cast as well. As I'm bringing that rod tip forward like this, you can see how much this rod bends. This is a really soft little rod right here. It's a 2/8 I use with blue and brim. You can see it bends a lot. You catch a big brim on this, you need a gaff to land it. But as you bring, okay, go with me. You bring the rod forward, it's got a bend to it. See, it's got a bend because it's got the load of the rod. If I bring this rod too fast forward, what happens? I get a lot of bend here. And then if I slow down, because that's what's gonna happen. If you start too fast, you end up slowing down, right? You can't go more than a
We're
certain
not a
speed.
machine, you can't keep accelerating.
Right. So you might be going 400 feet per second right here with that rod tip. And right at this point. And then you might slow down to 350 feet per second. That doesn't sound like much, does it?
What happened to the rod tip when he did that?
Yeah, it unloads. The nanosecond, it unloads the loop forms. Guess what happens? It's over. The cast is over.
It is over. It's a recipe for tailing.
Right. So recipe for tailing as well as for
Outcome.
Tailing is when your line just drops out in front, or it doesn't really stretch out. Is that what causes that? Or?
Well, what happens is, you see how it bends the rod like this? It actually dips from where it starts, okay? And so what ends up happening is, this line then comes underneath that line and forms a little knot. It
Okay.
can form a little knot in there. Usually what happens is your lead gets tangled. But how do you overcome that? Well, you do by smooth acceleration. You start slow and end fast, okay? And the first time I saw Joan Wolf, I couldn't believe it. Joan Wolf was about this tall. My mom was that tall. So she was like thin. And I said, she's no bigger than my mom. She's thin and she's short and she can cast 90 feet. she could outcast all the guys that were out there doing the huffing and puffing and trying to, as Gary Borger says, they were trying to fight seagulls with the end of their fly rod. That's what they look like, you know. And she was there and she just made this nice little smooth cast and it went out 90 feet. Now, she was a dancer, a professional ballerina or something like that. So she had this essence of grace and everything. You know, everything she did in dancing was smooth. Her movements were smooth and everything else. And so if you look at some of her videos, and they're on YouTube, by the way, go look up Joan Wolf on YouTube and you'll see. And she just does everything kind of really smooth like that. And it starts kind of slow and it just ends to a fast, hard stop. Now, she does something else too. And Doug Swisher did this as well. And that is, they would keep their hand kind of cocked back a little bit on their cast. As they brought it back, they would then kind of just flip, I wouldn't say flip it, that's it. Flip it like this. And that gave that little bit of acceleration at the very end, kind of like this. See? Doesn't seem like much, but it makes a world of difference.
But if you watch Catch when he did that, he did the flick on the back and then he did the flick on the front too.
Right.
And he got more out of it.
See? And you'll notice something else. I don't, you see some people casting. You see some people casting, they're doing this. Okay. The problem with that is, if you have a shoulder problem, which I had for a little while when I first started casting, I dislocated my shoulder playing flag football. And I was trying to do that because somebody was teaching it that way. I was like, oh man, you know. Dave Diaz said, don't do that. He said, you never need to do that. He made me hold the magazine under my arm like this so I could keep my shoulder and arm in. And it worked wonders.
What you're doing though, is you're taking all this rotational stuff out of it. If you hold your arm out to the side, you got all kinds of places where your angles can come off. And all. Do it this way, it's easier.
Right. And if you need more power, the way to do it is to actually extend your arm out. That's what Gary Borton did when I saw him cast 80 feet.
And if you watch Jeff Ferguson cast 90 feet, he does exactly that.
Right. Just
His elbow comes out into the direction.
notice that the rod tip right there is at 10 o'clock, my 10 o'clock, right there. But I've still, so I've kept that arc 10 to 1. I've just extended that whole stroke. And that's what. And somebody like a Danny Ayo, who broke the record, casting record, he broke Bill Gamble's record at Southern Concrete one year with a 143-foot cast. Yeah. You never see him. He was one of the smoothest casters I've ever known, but he also had this motion where he went way back like this on his double haul. And he was way over here, but that rod tip was still aiming at, 130 or so position. And then he'd bring it back like that. And, Danny wasn't tall. Danny is about 5'11", I think. But he just uses that.
Caught somewhere.
I saw Steve Rahaf, who's the world champion, single-handed caster, who's got 240-foot cast. I saw him eye cast. And he's this tall. He's got long arms and long, So when he does that same motion that Danny Ayo does, and bring it forward like that, he's covering, he's doing it with a 10-foot rod. He's covering an angular distance that's probably half the size of this room right here, the length of this room. But you don't need to.
The guys from Norway are actually taking about 3 steps in one direction too when they're trying to do that. They're really, you watch it on YouTube, they get their arm way out there and they get their whole body and they're taking 3 big steps too.
But here's a little secret, 99.9% of all the fish I've ever caught have been under 50 feet. So all that is just good for glamour and show, but it doesn't really help you cast. It's far more important to be efficient and accurate than it is to be long and efficient. I didn't think I had a hook on there. I was acting like this. Chris, you wanted to mention something else about soon leaving.
If you're really into physics, there is a publication written by Dr. Soon Lee. He's a retired internist that you can look him up on the internet. He's on YouTube, and he goes through the actual physics of loop formation. Soon Lee, he has a book out. He's also been published in the Loop, the FFI casting instructor journal, and he goes through this and talks about the loop. And from a physics standpoint, you go from a loaded bent rod tip to a straight. That's called rod straight position 1. As you're making your cast, you're probably aware that your rod doesn't stop right there. Your rod keeps going and goes to a point of maximum deflection. And then it comes back to rod straight position 2. And somewhere in between that time, your loop forms. And he goes through how these very fast motions cause your loop to form. If you do this right, you get a very tight, narrow loop, which you can aim better, which will pierce the wind better, which will deliver a fly better. It all is about bending the rod tip, which goes back to one of the 5 fundamentals or essentials of fly casting. Your fly line is going to do what your rod tip tells it to do. So work on these things. Make a straight line rod tip pass. Let's see, your pause back here in the back, that's more about preparing for moving forward and loading. But if you really want to get into fly casting physical geekdom, he's a guy that can show you how to do it. He has been on the FFI casting board of governors. He's a master casting instructor. He's from California. He's got the credit.
And another gentleman who, along with him, is Bill Gamble. I was just mentioning.
Bill Gamble is the junior author on the essentials of fly fishing. This is the seminal book on fly casting. If you want to know, if you're a guy that goes back to the source, this is the beginning, right here. Bill Gamble, and what was his father's name?
But I know that you can get this from FFI. We're an FFI affiliated club.
It's Bill and Jay.
You don't have to be an FFI member to get this. You can go to our website and get
It's
it.
about $5.
Since you're a member of the club.
Yeah. But the really cool thing about it is he lectures at the Texas A&M Fly Casting Conclave. He was there last year. He's going to be there again this year. It is worth the drive.
When is that?
Next weekend.
Okay, that just happens to be, but he does this every year. I was there last year. It's worth staying on Sunday afternoon to watch him. It's worth staying on Sunday afternoon to watch him.
Yeah, I know.
And he's very humble, very
I was
quiet,
gonna go,
calm
my contract
man.
happened in March, so.
Is it normally around this time?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And it's called the Aggieland Fly Fishers. And of course, I have to say, Bill Gamble's graduate of Texas A&M, so that's probably why he goes there and does this.
Around.
Yeah.
What's the name of the publication?
Oh, this here you go.
And it starts, is it like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
this time frame next year.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I can send you the link.
Okay.
But Bill Gamble, he's a guy that he starts out throwing 80 feet. And then he teaches you how at the end of your forward cast to rotate, as Catch was doing. He does that flick right at the end and he gets 40 more feet.
Yeah.
He goes out. The poor man, last time when I saw him, he was getting ready to have carpal tunnel syndrome repair on his hands. He could only put it out to 120 feet. He was struggling. A healthy Bill Gamble. Sorry.
Can I ask a really nerdy question?
Please.
Yes.
So, I've been, obviously understand about the rod tip, trying to keep it in a straight line. And I've heard about your hand being pretty much in a straight line, but at some point you have to break your wrist. And maybe I'll tell you what I'm doing and you tell me what I'm doing wrong or right. If you got your fly line out there in the water, I understand you're picking it up to kind of get the fly line off the water. But when you start that backwards, and I know you don't stop and then start moving, but you're raising your fly line off the water. At what point are you bringing your wrist back? Are you bringing it back at the same time? Because I was under the impression you're pretty much keeping your wrist straight. You don't want to be doing this, obviously. But are you bringing it back here and breaking it a little bit?
You're breaking it, you're not breaking it much.
Only breaking it there?
I'm kind of keeping it forward like this. At the very end, I'm flicking it back.
Just at the end?
That's the.
So you're actually keeping your wrist more like that rather than like that?
Yes, and if you do this, if you do that rotation early, what happens is you're gonna make your loop wider. Because your rod tip is going to move. It's going to move up. The key is holding on right until the end.
That's one of the things
See what happens when I
that's
do too
confusing
soon?
to beginners
Everybody.
who hear, don't break your wrist, but then they'll see, good casters doing exactly that,
Yeah.
but,
The
and
phrase-
so they don't,
It's almost a
You're not
misnomer.
really breaking.
You can move your wrist, but you don't get the wristy rainbow. You really don't want that.
And here's a little,
Because
here's a
he
little
doesn't
technique right here.
lock
If
in.
you're having a problem with, breaking the wrist like this, switch your grip. If you're using your thumb on top, switch it to either the index finger on top. You see, it's almost impossible to break your wrist doing that. It's almost impossible to break it too if you put your finger on one side and your thumb on the other side. That's also very difficult. You go too far back.
There's another trick to try too, and that is hold your rod with your reel to your side. When you cast, hold your reel against your forearm. You play the devil casting, break your wrist then. You can also, there's another trick, put your sleeve, put the end of this in your sleeve. That will minimize breaking your wrist. And then if you want to spend about $20, I'm sure Orbis will sell you a rubber band, to put in there as well. You can buy prosthetics that will keep you, you can, just practice. Practice not breaking your wrist is better than buying the prosthetic device.
Another thing that changing that grip does for you, one of the problems that Dave recognized that I had was when I went back like that, I was bringing forward and doing rotational. Okay?
Twisting?
Yeah.
Very easy.
And that, just by switching that grip like that, like this.
So what happens when you rotate right there?
Good.
Makes a figure eight drawing.
Well, what happens to your fly line?
Goes off to the left.
You get a curve.
Yeah, curve
You
cast.
get a curve.
Sometimes
Why?
you want
Because your rod tip curves. Yes, if you want to do it, that's good. But if your rod tip curves, your fly line is going to curve.
You're going forward and doing this?
Yeah.
So you're literally setting the fly tip.
Rod tip directs the path of the fly line.
Right.
It just does. That's the way it rolls. And it's a law of physics. It's one of the essentials.
Can't, you don't need any hooks.
No, it's hooks, right?
Oh, it's in the table. I get it, yeah. But, yeah, that's what Chris is talking about. Going back here and then look at the.
And that's a way to diagnose your own mistake as you're practicing casting or if you're fishing. If you have a curve in that line as it lays out, you have generated a move, a rotation in your rod tip as you're going forward.
Everybody's got one of these. You put it there and you cast the more than 3 or 4 minutes with this on. And then you go look at it. You know, you don't stand there and practice for 20 minutes, then go look at it. 3 or 4. Because probably in that 3 or 4 minutes, you did something wrong. You want to see it, analyze it there before you spend any more time practicing.
And you can slow it down
Yeah.
and see it because mistakes happen, they happen fast and you don't catch it. You can also do that with an iPad.
You want the whole thing, or do you just want, where you are?
Basically where you are. Because that,
You'll see where
yeah.
what you're doing in that space.
And you can
The rest-
self-evaluate because when you're out there casting, because if for example, I make too wide a loop, I get all these little curves in there, okay? If I overpower the rod to start with, and then, slow down, I see these curves in there.
So when you take your pictures of yourself, you can shoot yourself from this side, or another view is from the back or from the very front. Don't just look at one view because you may not see your movement.
Yeah. Put the
You know,
camera.
be in the plane
places.
that you're going in. Now, yes.
Can we get Jim Gilmore to go up there, we can practice criticizing?
Jim, are you packing?
But yes, if your line goes out nice and straight, you did something right.
Your rod tip path was straight.
Yes. And if you see curves or things like that, you did something wrong. Now, later on, advanced, you'll find out that there are times you want to do a curve. There are things called pendulum cast. This, see where you want to put curves in there. Where do you think you might use that cast?
Around an object or something, maybe, I don't know.
Anybody else want to guess? Moving water, stream.
Was it that mending thing you're talking about?
That's the technique that you can use. There's another one called a pile cast, where you just throw it up, drop it down, and you end up with wiggles of line right in front of you.
Well, I'm good at that.
Let the current go. The technique, the real difficult thing about the technique is getting the pile to end up in the current with your fly ending up in the feeding zone. Because then the current pulls your fly line and it spends its energy on that while your fly is hopefully getting eaten.
But that's why you
That's way
want
too
to.
advanced.
That's why
Yeah,
when
there's no way.
you still.
Yes, there's ways,
You're
yes.
still doing the basic cast up. And that, to get your fly out, you still do the basic cast, but what happens is, once you stop, that's when you make the motion, okay? Same thing with the reach min, okay? I've got I want current over here, and it's flies moving like this, right? I want to try to get a maximum float of that fly, okay? So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna, well, caught again. Okay, I'm going to bring it over like this. There's nobody sitting right here. So I can do it.
Another place to use that is if you're fishing a dock,
Bring it like this.
or you're fishing a barge. You position your kayak, or your boat, or whatever, 10 or 12 feet away from the structure. You cast out, and then you mend in the direction of the dock. So then when you retrieve your line, your fly is actually going right along the edge of the dock, or right along the edge of the barge.
But like we mentioned earlier about modularizing your cast, that takes place at the end of the cast. You're doing all these little techniques at the end of your cast.
A mend technically
So
is
everything
repositioning
else-
the fly line at the end of, after the stop.
3/4 of it was the same.
As advanced class, right?
but then at the very end, you do some little difference.
Next class.
Yeah,
When you're doing that,
that's why this basic is so important. As you get the basic down, that's just adding a little thing to the end of that cast.
I always struggle with that running stream, especially if there's slower water on the other side, so are you always mending to the
Upstream.
uphill side?
Upstream.
No, not always.
Well,
Depends on the current.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, it does.
So what's the best way to mend on a long cast? And you hit where you want to hit. You don't want the fly to move, but you want to get your fly line up ahead of it. How do you mend without moving that fly? What's the best way to mend without moving the fly? Off of the current seam you want to run.
Is to shoot the line and then mend. Okay?
And
Mend before
One
it
move.
lands.
You shoot the line out and then mend like this.
Before it drops.
Yeah, because if you hold it still and then you do that, when you try to do that, the fly's gonna come back inside.
So you gotta mend
And
there.
sometimes that's what you want. Sometimes you want that. You might want to just go ahead and throw it out there and then when you mend, bring it inside a
So
little
it's
bit.
an aerial mend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to a waterman, yeah.
So, yeah, you shoot the fly out, the line out, and then you mend like this.
In your case, go about 10 feet farther distance, because, you've got 9 feet of fly rod that you're gonna be sticking over here. So if you wanna make that triangle, you're gonna need, a little bit longer hypotenuse there.
Right.
That's why you shoot, he says shoot, give about 10 more feet.
And that mending takes place the fly has never landed on the water yet, in other words, all that
Correct.
motion's taking place before the line or the fly's on the water.
Yeah.
Perfect world, you'll be dropping that fly line at the same time the fly drops, and it'll lay out in a straight line. Perfect world.
But it's still moving the fly when you're moving the fly line.
Yeah.
So you
But
got,
instead of moving it this much, you're moving it this much.
well, you gotta anticipate,
Gotta
Your
go further
overcast
than your target.
so you're up against a bunch of willows, it gets a little dicey.
Don't try to unroll that top leg over the willows.
Mess. Any other questions? Anything else you want to add?
I think people need to go out in their front yard and try it.
So a curved cast is also overpowering the cast to make it swing, right? Or you underpower it to make it drop back.
Well, it's about direction of the rod tip.
Yeah.
It's about direction. If I do like that, or I just bring it, I make the rod tip move inside, I make the rod tip move outside, see? You got a curved cast.
Think in terms of rotating your wrist at the
So
very end.
Besides the basic pickup and lay down, what are probably the next important cast or skill set to develop beyond that?
Well, the first one is obviously false casting. You're doing the same thing with the forward cast that you do in the back cast, where you accelerate to stop, pause for a second, and then bring it back.
But are you catching a fish while you're doing that?
And then-
So you let mine out.
Oh, yeah.
You let the line out.
Or you might be knocking water off your fly.
Yeah, I see the people doing this, and this is what they're doing out there. And Gary Borger did.
They're screwing up their courage to drop the fly.
Presentation said, he said, you're casting for fish, not for birds. And I've seen people catch birds doing all this false casting like that. Eventually the bird came around and grabbed the fly. So,
But the two best things to work on, he started out with roll cast and the pickup and lay down. Mending, these things, there's a little more technical stuff, but what you're doing is you're piecing in one skill set, one step, you're adding these steps together until at the very end, Then you make a movement. After you've had your stop, you reposition your fly line. That's another skill. And you have created a mint, an aerial mint that happens before it hits the water. If you mend after it hits the water, you pick up slowly and you move over to the side. It's a water, something different. But that's the whole premise. What he's shown you is step by step by step. That's what Jason Borger's book is all about. That's what Bill Gamble teaches you. He teaches you step by step by step. He just doesn't call it a modular method of fly casting.
Is it Gamble or Gamble?
Gammel. Yes.
The wind, like, beginner, I mean, and I'm working on the pickup and all that, but you got a wind.
Jim, pass that back to us.
What you got 10 mile an hour, 15 mile an hour wind, what do I do? Besides try to just, is there like a shortcut to the side or?
Yeah, Dave Diaz was teaching us that first time we had that with Dave over there in our club in Baton Rouge. Was saying, if you go out on the coast, you're gonna have wind. That's almost a fact.
Right.
He said, you really don't want to be doing this overhead cast off your shoulder. The great thing about fly casting, the mechanics, the physics of it are the same, no matter whether I do it over my head or do it 90 degrees to the ground like this, parallel to the ground, I should say, or at this angle right here, or even at this angle right here. See, doesn't matter.
All works
It's
the
all
same.
the same.
But in case of wind, you can't do a roll cast when the wind is coming off of, you can't do a right-handed roll cast when the wind is coming from your right. So what you do then is you do a roll cast over your left shoulder. That's all you do. You don't have to move. You don't have to do anything else and all. You just go over and do the roll cast over this side. And guess what? Same motions, same movements. It may actually be a little bit easier.
So you're got wind, you don't go over the top. That's kind of what I'm used to. So where do you go? To the side?
Yeah, good side.
Do you go all the way 90 degrees or?
You can if you want.
Also, you need to work on having
Even learn
tight
to cast
loop.
with the other hand.
a very tight loop because it will pierce the wind much better.
Or cast over your shoulder.
And keeping it out of the wind more that way.
I thought you were gonna talk more about, when you say wind, most students say, well, what if I'm casting into the?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I am. I'm like,
As opposed to-
what do I do?
That's supposed to wind to the
Best
side.
solution is not to fish up and along.
Well, that's what I was thinking. You were saying 40 mile an hour winds, and I was like, well, I'm gonna sit on the boat just watching everybody else cast.
Nobody on the coast fishes when wind over here is 30 miles an hour.
No, but let's say it's.
No, but you can't go to the coast and find a dead column.
Our water gets
Not for
dirty.
long.
It's like chocolate milk when it's 30 miles.
So for beginners,
But out west, like Carlton was saying, out west, you can fish 30 mile an hour winds. It's tough, but you can do it. But what you do is you adjust your arc, okay? So if I've got the wind in front of me, what I'll do is, rather than 10 to 1, it might be like 9 to 12 or something like that. When I'm doing like that, and then there's a cast they call the Madison River cast, where it's basically you let the rod get up to about 12 o'clock like that, and you just push it down like this into the wind.
But the beauty about that, the wind is actually helping unroll your line behind you.
Yeah, it's loading that rod really good. I mean, you get up there.
One thing nice about casting into the wind.
Now, if you get the
Bad
wind,
casts are great.
Gotta turn around and do back.
yeah, if you got the wind to your back.
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
good.
man, your
You
roll
just gotta-
cast look really good then when you got the wind to your back.
But you gotta also make sure you don't have too much line out. If you got too much line out going into the wind like this on your back cast, it'll come right back and just die on you.
basically for me, I'm not gonna go out when it's windy.
Well, but you can't go to the coast and not count wind in.
Right.
But you can have wind, but you're gonna be in a kayak and you're gonna have 6 feet of marsh grass that is gonna be blocking your wind. You know, it's not gonna be all hard wind right where you're at.
But-
And in your Hobie, the wind is gonna blow you everywhere. So get an anchor.
Yeah,
Yours is like mine, it's a sail. It's a battleship. You're safe, but it's gonna blow you.
you make a trip somewhere like out west and it's blowing like that, you really don't want to just sit in a motel room in a cabin or whatever you're staying when there's, you know, went all this way and there's fish out there. The fish will bite no matter what the wind's blowing out there. So you just, you know, have to make some compensations with your casing.
Right. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. One of the best day trips I ever had in my whole life. I was out there with a guy by the name of Bill Saunders, and the storm came over the Gallatin Mountains on Madison River. And I'm not kidding, I think the wind was blowing 40 miles an hour. The trees were doing like this. It looked like the tropical storm down here. And we just caught monster brown trout on there. We had to paddle our way downstream in order to get to the boat launch to take out, because the current of the river was not strong enough to go against the wind, to get out of the boat against the wind.
So when you practice at home, don't wait for beautiful weather. Practice in all kinds of weather.
That's the other thing.
What would you tell us about how much line you have out when you shoot it? You know, if you're trying to shoot 100 feet of line, then you're gonna have to aerialize some line. But how much of it, you know, I mean, I think I've heard Jeff Ferguson say that he could aerialize, I don't remember, you know, like 75 or 80 feet of line.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he could shoot the rest of it and
You want me to answer this question?
But I'll tell you this much, if you get a marker or something and mark your fly line where the head ends, okay? Because anytime that you're carrying more line, a significant amount of line past the head, your cast starts to break down. You actually supporting heavier line with lighter line, physics mask, you know, it doesn't hold that structure up very well.
So what kind of fly line do you use? What kind do you have on your rod?
I've got Orbis,
The answer doesn't matter. The answer is you need to look it up and see how long your head is.
oh, I know. I
And
mean, I know
mark
what it
it
is.
as he's saying, because my Rio outbound short has a 40-foot head. You know, I can see it because the color changes, you know, but, you know, he's advocating little black magic mark, Sharpie.
I took the CI test, you had to aerialize 60 feet of line.
And you can't.
And I did it because I had triangle taper line, which has a long tapered section all the way out to 45 feet. And then it comes down again like that. So basically it was, you know, it was supportive if I had a heavy weight forward line. Some of these guys were out there using heavy weight forward lines, you know, the ones with sharp heads and everything, thinking, oh yeah, I'll get more this and the casting and everything else. Then you took the aerial test and the line was, the cast was just breaking down and they failed that.
They're tailing left and right.
Yeah.
Now, there's a guy named Bruce Richards who is on the casting board of governors for Fly Fishers International. He has written an article that says, really, you don't have to worry about shooting this line or anything like that. He said, get yourself a good casting arc. He said, you don't have to double haul, you don't have to do all this stuff, get a good casting arc. And if you look at Jeff Ferguson, who can aerialize 80, 90 feet of line, he has a beautiful casting farm.
Hmm.
And the guys that can really lay it out there have great straight rod tip paths. They have great casting arcs. They put their acceleration starts from 0 and goes to 1,000 miles an hour and stops dead. You know, they have minimum slack. They match their paws to how long their line is. It's a beautiful thing. You know, it's like MacGyver. I mean, a plan comes together. You know,
Poetry and.
yes,
Y'all
and that's Joan Wolfe.
Y'all familiar with Andy Mill? He was a world champion tennis player, turned tarpon fishing, and now he's like tarpon guru, and he's got all these world records. And I see him every now and then at one of the shows. I saw him at ICAST back in July. He's like Chris was saying, he's got the most beautiful stroke. And he was out there test casting one of the rods out there. And he piled up line against the wall 100 feet away. It just went, it just piled up against the wall, came down. He had at least 140 feet line out on that. So, yeah, you know, but he's an athlete. He's got that smoothness about him from playing, I guess from playing tennis or whatever. Everything just works all right. That's why golfers make great.
He was a skier.
A skier, that's right, skier, I'm sorry, I
Like
said
Olympic
tennis, I
skier.
said skier. Yeah, he was world championship skier. But that's why golfers make great fly casters too. Because they've got, you know, they've got smoothness, and they've developed that technique and everything else, and they just apply it to the fly casting.
Well, when you think about the acceleration of a golf swing is the same as accelerating the fly rod. You start at 0 and you end up at full speed. It's the same thing. I mean, the acceleration portion. It costs more.
Anything else?
So is anybody gonna go practice? That's the thing, practice.
Practice and.
It's better to practice at your house rather than gassing up a boat and going out and paying for a hotel room and doing all that. And I'll practice at home before you go.
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest thing for me today was taking out the stupid hat and went out and put it out there, laid it down, and I went, holy moly, they're now the target. And I could see where my line was going and where it wasn't going, and I was all doing all that, and I was like, Shazam, where's that thing, you know, I mean, it totally changed how I'm seeing, and then, you know, how the line was, whether it was going straight or doing whatever, I mean, so.
So if the fly line
That was your hat.
lands
I thought that
straight,
was the rabbit.
No, that was, but he had to take my hat and put it out there, yeah, that really.
but if your fly line is going straight, what's your rod tip doing?
Straight.
That's right. And your casting arc is straight.
Right.
That's where they get this idea about this tomahawk cast. You know, you cast a tomahawk like this, and you get it straight. You know, but if you rod tip path has to be straight. If your end result is straight, your rod tip path is straight. If your end result has a curve in it, you had a curve in your rod tip path. If you know, and it depends because you can curve the other way too, and you get a curve the other direction. If you rotate at the very end of it, you're going to get a curve. What'd I do? Well, what happened to my rod tip path? You learn that, self-analyze, and go back and change it. Take a picture of yourself with, like he said, this is a great idea. Use an iPhone and videotape yourself because we all think that we're perfect. In our minds, we're perfect. You know, you say, I am stopping at 12 o'clock. You think? Take a picture, video. It's very humbling. You know, there's a fancy word, it's called proprioception. You know, that means it's perception of body movements. Is what it is. You'll see these kids that go out here, they're 17 years old, they've never seen a fly rod, but they can play football and they can take great coaching, and somebody can show them, tell them, make your rod tip go in a straight line. The kid goes out there, he knows what he's doing. Boom. What happened to it?
Yeah, Jacob was, like the kid Jacob was like that. I mean, he never cast a fly rod before. And 30 minutes later, he was looking like.
If he'd have caught a fish, if he'd have caught that fish, he'd still be there.
Yeah.
Of course, I think Catch had more fun than Jacob did. That's what's fun about it. And seeing the light go off, making your own light go off, because then. And another thing too, you fish in a boat, practice in a chair. You fish in a kayak, practice in your kayak chair.